Hey, Mr. Grumpy Gills. When life gets you down, you know what you gotta do?
I don't want to know what you gotta do.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming. What do? We swim, swim.
Dory, no singing.
Dory. I love to swim in.
Dory.
When you want to swim, you want
See,
to
I'm gonna get stuck now with that song now.
Sorry.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. What's up, fam squad? I've got some pretty exciting news. If you listen to the podcast much, you know we've been building a pretty vibrant community of truly extraordinary people who have committed to an unconventional route through life. The Successful Dropout audience has been growing a lot, and I get a lot of people reaching out to me now with all sorts of questions regarding education, dropping out, opting out, entrepreneurship, resources, networking, etc. So much so that I decided it was time to create a more accessible community on Facebook so that we can all ask and answer these kinds of questions together, as well as celebrate our successes and encourage each other during inevitable adversity. So I've created a closed Facebook group, and I want to invite you to join it. If you follow Successful Dropout, if you resonate with our philosophy and want to help me grow this thriving community, go to successfuldropout.com/group. This community is for the rebels, the outliers, the innovators, the doers, and those who dare to dream and act on their dreams. If you're a dropout, an opt-out, if you're thinking about doing one of those things, if you're a parent, even if you aren't any of those things and you graduated school, I want to invite you to join. All that matters is that you resonate with the Successful Dropout philosophy and that you enter the group with the intention to provide value to the other members and not just receive value yourself. Again, go to successfuldropout.com/group to request admission. Once you're a part of the group, introduce yourself and get involved, and I'll see you there. What is up, Successful Dropouts? I am stoked because today on the show, we have a guest coming on for the second time, and that is Braun Shedd. And he did not disappoint. We had an amazing conversation, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to it. Braun, if you remember, he was on the show for the first time several months ago. I believe he was episode 37. Yep, I'm looking at it now. Episode 37, How to Live More Lifetimes Than the Average Person with High School and College Dropout, Braun Shedd. And surprisingly enough, his episode, that first episode with him, is still the most popular episode on Successful Dropout. As far as downloads go, and him and I have tried to figure out why exactly, and I think the answer is just that he gets so authentic, and we go into and talk about some very deep things, and his first episode with us, episode 37, marks kind of a really important milestone in Successful Dropout history or lore or whatever you want to call it. And it's that, right around the time of releasing his episode is when the podcast really blew up. And that's due to two important things happening. I pumped out episodes for 7-8 months without anybody really listening when I first launched Successful Dropout. And two very important things happening. The first was that we were featured on BuzzFeed, and that was incredible. I'm very grateful for that, and we still get traffic from that even to this day. And the second thing that happened is I had Braun Shedd on the show, and it was the first time that I sort of allowed a free-flowing conversation on the podcast. Up until then, I'd really stuck to a pretty strict interview flow like a lot of podcasts out there, and just sort of asking the same questions just with different guests. And my conversation with Braun the first time was the first episode of the podcast where we really just had this authentic conversation, and people just really responded well to that. And Braun, for weeks afterwards, was sending me emails that he was getting from listeners on the show, and he was forwarding these emails to me, and I was incredibly pleased with the response that you guys gave to his episode. And so I had him on a second time. And he did not disappoint. We talk about a lot of different things. We as soon as we connected on Skype, we just started talking, and so there's no formal intro. We just kind of started talking, and the conversation evolved, and I was just like, yeah, we're just gonna keep it as is because this is amazing. We talk about everything from crypto to startups to finding meaning in life and discovering your why. And Braun gives us some very practical tools and knowledge in all those different areas. The guy is truly a philosopher at heart, and I believe the epitome of a successful dropout. He really embraces and epitomizes that the successful dropout philosophy. And so after that, let's just jump right into it. I really hope that you guys enjoy this conversation as much as I did while we were having it. So yeah, let's get into it. This now, it's not that bad, and we're dealing with forest fires up here.
Oh shit!
All over the place. Actually, today it's really clear. Fortunately, I can actually see blue sky. But man, we weren't seeing the sun for days on end, and ash was just falling out of the sky. It looked like it would be snowing at points.
My buddy who lived in Seattle, he was taking photos of the wildfires out, and I guess it was in Canada, and it was like sunset, and it's like brown tinted by like sepia shaded by like 10 degrees. I'm like, holy shit, dude, that's like nuclear holocaust level scary air quality.
Seriously,
right
it's almost apocalyptic the way it looked out here sometimes. And we're out in the woods, and when the smoke gets really, really thick, you'll look out in the woods and the smoke's just sort of hovering, and everything kind of has this sepia effect. You can barely see the sun, and then all of nature just quiet. There's no birds chirping, there's nothing, so it's just dead silence and just this fog in the air. And then we live on a lake, right?
Dry.
We'll go, it's very dry. I mean, and we live on a lake, right? So we'll go down to we have a kind of a private dock down there. We'll go down there, and you can't even see to the other side of the lake to the ridge, so it's just, you look out and it's just this fog. And then it's so eerie. It is. It's like living in an apocalypse. And then they're doing a bunch of rock blasting up on Snoqualmie Pass up here. So the other day we left and we were traveling down the freeway, and we got on the freeway and nobody's there because they'd shut it down for this blasting. And so it even added to the effect. We were traveling for like 30 minutes. Just on a 4-lane freeway, just not a car in sight, didn't see anybody for 30 minutes, and then there's this haze and smoke, and it's like, are we in The Walking Dead? I expected zombies to walk out of the forest any minute.
Dude, that's pretty fucking
but
wild.
It looks like they're coming under, some of them are getting a little more contained, but a lot of them won't be till mid, October, they're saying, just because of the lack of rain. They're just foreseeing it becoming drier and drier, and just not being able to contain these fires.
Yeah, see, I thought the whole wildfire thing was more of like an LA type situation, like SoCal, because that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think, but if you just zoom out, the entire Northwest is there's just flames everywhere. If you zoom out on a map of all the active fires right now.
Have you ever been to what's the name? Can't believe, what's the name of the huge ass national park? Washington, Oregon, Idaho. Yeah, have you been to Yellowstone?
Yeah, once a while back.
When you drive and it's like you'll go through an area and then it's just black burned trees for like hundreds of acres, right. And you're looking out and you're like, holy shit, when did this happen? Oh, it happened like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, yep. Whoa, that's not good. It takes 40 years to look like this.
Yeah, that's what happens. We were just backpacking the other week too, and we backpacked through a section that I think it was back in 2012. It was on fire, and there was some green like foliage just starting to come up. But other than that, it looked kind of like an apocalypse. Just burned, charred, black trees, and then the ground was just probably a foot of just ash,
Right,
step out into it, it's just poofing up all over your feet. Just that's what we're dealing with over on this side of the country, and then we get on the news and see all the flooding and hurricanes and
I think Florida's actually not doing too bad.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of dissipating or moving more towards Tennessee now. But I mean, my buddies down in South America, they just had an earthquake down there. He almost had to jump out of the building he was in because it was looking like it was going to collapse, and it's like,
Yeah.
the whole world's coming to an end here.
Well, that's what they've always been saying. Al Gore told us so.
I know. I'm just mad because I haven't seen my crypto investments pay off yet. So it can't end yet.
Yeah, just remember, you shouldn't be doubling down to make up. That's gambler's fallacy right there. It's like, oh fuck, I lost a shitload of money. Let's what is it called? Let's do some margins. Let's buy some crypto options.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a long-term holder in that area, but
Did I tell you when I got in and out of crypto?
no. I'm liking this conversation so far, though. I'm thinking we might just start the podcast off somewhere a little bit, tracked back here, because it's pretty interesting. But yeah, tell me.
I ran a mining farm for Bitcoin. And this was like 2012 or 2013.
What?
So when it was new, I had found out about it because I had been randomly searching Wikipedia pages, surfing Wikipedia pages.
Right.
And one of them was list of world's largest supercomputers. And you look at list of the world's largest distributed supercomputers. And usually the biggest one is folding at home. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, I'm not.
It's generally people who need to justify to their wives and significant others that they need to spend 10 grand on a computer hardware.
Right.
They do it for folding, which is I guess biomedical researchers attempt to run algorithms to see how proteins fold in order to research drugs or medications or any of that stuff.
Okay.
And that's always just been the go-to if you have a $10,000 computer.
So that's the reason you give for kind of an excuse to.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they have competitions. You get so many points depending on the power of your rig and all this stuff. So I had looked, and that was number 2. And number 1, Bitcoin had just eclipsed that. I was like, oh, what the fuck is this? And sure enough, you go into the rabbit hole. I mean, this was when Bitcoin was at 10 cents.
Oh my gosh.
10 cents. That's when I got into it. So 10 cents, the dark web wasn't even a thing. You couldn't buy drugs or hitmen or whatever. This was literally useless. There was absolutely no utility for this money. You were still getting 50 Bitcoins per block. You were still using CPUs. GPUs were a new thing even back then. It was could we do that? Does that make any sense? And so me being, I was 14. I was like, oh, whoa, I can steal my parents' electricity and make money. This sounds excellent. Especially since all you're really doing is you're converting electricity that you pay for into Bitcoins that cost about the same amount or maybe a little less. So it's kind of like stealing, to be honest. But I was 14, so I was like, oh yeah, this is the ideal situation. So I ended up, I bought a $100 graphics card on Amazon, and I started from there. And my whole premise was, I was like, all right, and everyone thought this too, Bitcoin was going to disappear overnight. It was a cool experiment that the exchanges, literally, it was going to go from 10 cents to 0 cents tomorrow. It's like that guy who had to spend 10,000 Bitcoins to buy a pizza, which is a famous story back then. But I remember when it happened, people were like, holy shit, you can buy pizza with something worthless like Bitcoin?
Oh, that's incredible.
So created, essentially just by the number of coins I was mining with this $100 graphics card, every time I got, $100 more, I would sell it and then buy more hardware. Because I was thinking the hardware will still have value no matter what, right? Even if Bitcoin goes down the trash. So I eventually, over the course of several months, maybe 6 to 9 months, I went from one graphics card to, it was 2 cabinets with 6 computers in each. So 12 drawers. And these drawers were custom wooden frames because there was no case that could hold this. Essentially, the cheapest combination of computer hardware you could find on eBay that supported the maximum number of graphics cards that you could fit literally just in a row. So it was one motherboard supported 6 graphics cards. And these were the Radeon 5970s, which were dual processor graphics cards. I mean, these were real legit, real hot. They were 250 watt cards. And, Jesus, do the math. We were pulling like 100 amps of power at 120 volts. So I was doing this. At this point, I had enlisted my buddy, whose dad is a contractor, and they had an outdoor cabana that was covered. So we ran extension cords from like 3 different parts of the house because no circuit breaker supports 100 amps all in the same place.
Right.
So we were running extension cords from all over the house, combining like 2 or 3 computer power supplies in a chain in order to power these cards. That room that we enclosed them in, I swear to God, it was below freezing outside at one point. with the windows open, doors open, whatever, it was 90 degrees in that room.
Good Lord, man.
It was incredible.
So where's this story going? Are you like a secret Bitcoin millionaire that I just don't know about?
No, it has a much sadder ending than that, unfortunately. So mining. And again, we just I keep buying more hardware as I keep mining more coins. And at this point, Bitcoin had gone up from like 10 cents to $1. We were like, whoa, this is like lit, dude. We're making, I think we were making like $300 a week or something like that, which
nice.
At 14 or 15, that's like primo money, even though these things are probably the closest thing to a fire hazard you could guess. I had just started maybe my freshman or sophomore, I guess it was my freshman year, and going. Bitcoin goes up from $1 to $5, from $5 to $10. $10 was like a big thing. It was like, whoa, these are not worthless per se anymore. There were a couple articles being written about it online. We were like, whoa, cash out. This is the bubble, and it will go straight back down to zero. So I cashed out, right? Most of the money was in the hardware. Some of it was in Bitcoins, but all told, selling all the hardware in Bitcoins at $10, which we thought was going to be like the best you were going to get. Mm-hmm. I made like 10 grand, which, doing the math for the number of Bitcoins I had back then, if I had all of them today and sold, I would have had something close to like, what is it, like $4,000 right now, right?
Oh man,
something like that. No. So at $4,000 today, it would have been something like theoretically $30 or $40 million.
Oh, that's painful.
Which I mean, again, you look at that and you're like, wow, holy crap, that would have been a lot of money. That would have been nice, right? Just save 1/10, and then, but. What people don't realize today is that back then, I mean, it was a completely different story. No one thought it was going to exist. It was a scam perpetrated by computer nerds just to see what would happen.
Right.
There was no utility. Right. There was no drugs. There was, you couldn't buy anything on websites with it, any of that. So I don't feel bad per se for having lost my chance to be a millionaire way back when, an Eric Finman, if you will. But does make for a good story.
Yeah, I mean,
that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, seriously. But I mean, it seems like the majority of Bitcoin millionaires you find today are people that seem to have bought it back in 2012, 2013 or whatever, and kind of forgotten about it. And then one day they wake up to the news saying Bitcoin's at $1,000.
Right. There are stories of guys who've thrown away hard drives that they had like formatted or thrown out that have, at this point, like $10 million in Bitcoin on them.
Yeah. I've heard about, there was a guy in Australia or something that did that, and they were going back to the landfill trying to find it. Oh.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about Bitcoin is that all those they're gone now. There's no way to get those.
Well, controlled inflation, that's the interesting premise behind it, right?
Yeah.
Something that we've never seen before in any fiat currency, at least.
So really quick then, are you in crypto at all now, or no?
I'm not in crypto at all now, mostly because I got burned so bad back then, just from like where it's gone then to where it's gone now, that at this point I'm not entirely convinced that I'll ever have the same opportunity to make the same. It's trendy now. Like, you can go on some of these hedge fund websites and startups and stuff and like hedge some of your retirement in Bitcoin.
Interesting.
Which at that point, now it's kind of mainstream. That's not to say that there can't be big gains to be made, but I'm just at the point now. I can't convince myself when I had Bitcoins at 10 cents or $1 or $10 to buy one $4,000. It's just that doesn't compute for me. That gives me heartburn.
Yeah, most of the opportunity is more in the altcoins, now than anything. I mean, some of them, if you know what you're doing, which most of the time it's such a Wild West sort of atmosphere out there still. It's hard to know, but man, people have doubled their money in like the space of like 30 minutes, and then if you're not careful, you can lose all that in like the next 5 minutes. I mean, it's insane. I would say it's probably getting a lot more mainstream for more of the like more technically inclined people like yourself. For the majority of people, like, I don't know if I would say right now that it's at like mass adoption. At the same time, I think it's past the early adoption phase and somewhere like sort of in the middle. I mean, I think if people started getting into a few coins, a few technologies like this year yet, in 2-3 years time, if it continues to grow overall as a market, I think people will be looking back wishing they would have gotten in, to some key technologies, around this time period. But I don't know if you ever saw, man, my story of, let's see, I got into about my first pieces or shares or whatever you call them in Bitcoin and Ethereum and stuff back in July, and ended up getting hacked and losing it all. Did you ever see that story?
We had talked about it.
Did we? Okay, yeah, I remember now. Man.
I was showing you my spam folder, all of the phishing emails from the exact same.
That's
scam.
right. You sent me one from Bittrex. Yep. That's right. Yeah, something like, because it kind of went viral on Reddit. Something like 100,000 people probably total between the podcast and Reddit and stuff have, I think, heard that story now. But I'm jumped right back into it and loving it.
It's kind of interesting. So there are two things I figured out. One, I know how they got everyone's email addresses, yours included probably. There was a leak of all of the login info for, I think it was bitcointalks.org or something, which was the primary forum for all kinds of Bitcoin discussion and everything like that.
Yeah.
And, if you go to, I think it's called Have I Been Pwned, which is some website you can go to and put in your email, and it'll show you how many different companies or websites have leaked your login info all over the internet. That's one of the ones that shows up. So,
oh man.
You can call that targeted phishing if you'd like, but I'm actually kind of impressed. They're fairly convincing emails if you look at them right.
Oh yeah, well, they're extremely convincing.
The amount of money they can extract, I can imagine they can probably afford to spend the time to make them look a little bit better than the Nigerian 411 scams you usually see.
Seriously, I mean, in my case, they made $8,500 in 15 minutes. So
right,
it's
pretty
probably
easy.
worth the payoff. But anyways. Moving on, though, I mean, I know we'd outlined a couple different topics to go over, and we have about another 30 minutes here. But I'd be curious, just for people listening, because by the time people are listening to this, I'll have already done a bit of an intro on you, just reintroducing you, even though you've been on the show before. But since you have been on the show, last time you were with ActiveView, and I know a lot's happened between now and then, so I think you should give us all a brief overview of that story.
Well, as you know, it's kind of like dog years when you're in startup land. One month is like 7 years or something like that.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, we at this point, it's been maybe a month and a half since I've left kind of the remainder of the ActiveView team, which, to protect the innocent and the guilty both, I won't go too much into it, but the kind of primary gist to take away is I'd been there for 18 months, so a year and a half at a startup. We had raised 2 rounds at that point, so a first kind of angels round and then a larger kind of seed round. And there's certainly a lot of lessons I've learned over the past 18 months, just in terms of longer term kind of visioning goals, now that you've started and stopped something. And more so, I always had issues growing up with, I always felt like I knew the theoretical essentials of how to, let's say, start a company or run a startup or whatever. I had read a lot of things. I could tell you all of the dogma, how you manage people, how you raise money, all that.
Right.
But I always felt like I just couldn't put it together. I couldn't do it for whatever reason. Like, I knew how, I just couldn't figure out how to fit the pieces together. Mm-hmm. And so, despite being interested in kind of the field for a long time and computers and everything else, I had never really done anything super legitimate with that knowledge. It had always been kind of, I knew a lot, but there had never been a trial by fire of actually using any of that information, which
right.
It's an easy trap to fall into, because actually committing to, I can't tell you the number of startups I've had before ActiveView that were, projects that were fun for a couple months. I would spend time on them here and there. They may or may not have made much or any money. But now that I've actually attempted to run a startup, I'll tell you that none of those other things I started, they were all just projects. They were fun things. A startup,
perspective, huh?
Yeah, a startup, unfortunately, is not something that conceivably could make money at some point somehow, that you spend a couple hours a week on, perhaps while you're in school, and you put it on your LinkedIn when you're done with the photo, and your combined cost is maybe 100 hours of your time and maybe $100 in various other fees.
That's not a startup.
It's not a startup. And I mean, it's invaluable because you learn all kinds of things. You learn, oh my gosh, there's a huge gap between me pitching you a concept for like, oh, do you think, Uber for dog walking is a good idea? And you say, you know what, that sounds feasible. Like, I could see something like that existing, right? You might even own a dog, and you're like, I would use that. Great. If you're doing the 100-hour startup, you'd say that is perfect enough, market validated, let's move on.
Right.
In the real world, that question is so much more nuanced and hard to get that, unfortunately, you only find out the real answer to, am I building something people want, after, months, maybe even for some instances, years of building out whatever it is you're working on.
Yep.
The biggest thing I learned is that, especially with a startup, I mean, I had, like we had talked about, I had jumped all in. It was the first thing that I had done after I had quit my previous job, after I left Dallas to move to San Francisco. It's so easy to convince yourself when you're going all in that it has to work. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to convince yourself that it should work for all of these reasons and everything. And it's one thing to be optimistic, but eventually what you run into is a gambler's fallacy kind of problem, where you are so convinced that it should or will work that you're no longer asking whether it can or whether it should work. So that you don't psych yourself out. You just kind of say, yes, this is something the world wants. Yes, this is something the world needs. Yes, it makes sense in every way. Mm-hmm. Because remember, Amazon isn't just we sell things online. There are 1,000 fragments to, can we ship things to people on time? Can we offer them prices that are competitive? Can we convince people to sell their product on Amazon? All of those things have to work for Amazon to exist. Mm-hmm. And, the biggest lesson I've learned is, after investing 18 months in a startup like this, and I'm glad that I have, it's that if you choose something that you're going to go all in on, realize that your time also has value. You only get so many, 18 months is what is that? That's like 5%, roughly, a little more. It's like 5 to 7% of my entire life so far. I've invested 5 to 7% of my life on that company. And that it needs to be something that it's worth your time, because you only get so many hours to invest on anything. invest 5% of your life, 20 times. That's kind of the combined, that's all you're going to get.
So are you saying that you feel like it wasn't worth your time in some way?
No, I mean, so the experience I got from working those 18 months, you get kind of you have a bell curve of experiences from, like we had talked about, kind of the more often you do something, the less you get out of it, just because it's more and more familiar. So
yeah, right.
When I started this company, I had already done all of the 100-hour side projects that I needed to, the cool ideas that seemed like they could work, but then school got too busy, or you were lazy, or all of those things. So
right.
This is the first time I've attempted to run an actual company, raise money, run a real startup. And the learning curve you get from that is completely different. Just like real life, there are all these truisms that you get for any given thing. It's good to be nice to people, but you should put your foot down and don't let them use you. It's good to be open and welcoming to other people's ideas, but you need to keep your vision strong. You need to make sure that you have directed beliefs and that you're keeping the company on focus. You can find any truism to prove or disprove any idea that you want, because for every truism that says X, there's an anti-truism that says Y. and you can find examples that they're both true, which is why they're truisms. But what you learn whenever you do something like starting a company that is legit, that you spend a lot of time on, a lot of money on, a lot of life on, is you learn the difference between knowing some fact and understanding said fact. Startups are hard. I think we talked about this before. Startups are hard. Fact. Everyone will tell you that. And you're like, great, I'm done. I get that.
Right.
Then you experience that. What does that mean? Startups are hard. You may or may not have any friends at all while you're working. You're working so many hours, working so hard, working with probably a lot of similar people who have so much going on that you may or may not have any social life to speak of, which, again, fact, you say, okay, that's good. I don't need my friends. I'm an individual. I'm fine spending time on my own. I'm good with that.
Right.
And then when it happens to you, you understand what that's like, which is not quite the same detached feeling that perhaps you thought it would be. Humans being social creatures, it's if you look on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think it's level 2, right above food and sleeping and sex. So there are a lot of, that's a perfect example. That's also one of the biggest things I learned kind of starting and running this company over the last 18 months was, it's very easy to convince yourself, especially if you're Silicon Valley based or in that culture. Everyone says go all in, sell your soul to the devil, do literally whatever it takes to make it succeed. And there's a time and a place to do that. I see why they say that. But what ended up happening to me is you very quickly make your life miserable, absolutely miserable. You're working insane hours. I still have, I maybe met 10 people the entire 2 years that I lived out in San Francisco, and I maybe still talk with 2 of them. And I lived there for 2 years. I mean, that's a long time. That's like going to school and 2 people and you don't know anyone else in the school.
Right.
You spend all this time on an idea that you're 100% convinced will work for all of these reasons. So as an engineer, I'm building product, I'm building concepts, designs, I'm making the best thing that I can because I like building things. But I invest 1% of that time in actually evaluating, am I building the right thing? Mm-hmm. Does every requirement of this idea, is it satisfied? Do people want it? Are they willing to pay? Are they able to pay? Is it something that can be marketed? Do we know how to reach the people that we're trying to sell to? Right. Maybe they're just not able to get, maybe we're not able to get in touch with them. And so time comes around and you realize that you've spent months, plenty sleepless nights, a lot of isolation and kind of lone hours, mm-hmm. to realize that when you do that 1% kind of calculation, maybe you should have spent a little bit more time kind of evaluating that you were working on the right thing in the first place, and that all of the answers were kind of answered before you jumped in and spent all that time. I mean, I hate talking this way because I know whenever I had started doing all of this, people talk in really general terms like that because they don't know how to express them in a way that they're all experience based. Mm-hmm. So I always want to try to distill examples of what I'm talking about, just so that I'm not reiterating various truisms that people hear all the time.
Right.
Because I know that doesn't help. I can tell you it doesn't help. I've felt it and I've learned that fact. So I guess I'll give you the rundown of the 3 or 4 things that you definitely want to know before you jump all into a startup or a company or something like that. So
perfect. Yeah.
1, at the end of the day, it's not what you want. It's the cold hard truth is you're selling a product or service to people who find it valuable. Mm-hmm. You can try to scam them. You can try to convince yourself that because you really love doing X that other people will love it. That doesn't matter. The truth is you are providing utility service to society and other people. So the foundation of any company has to be that you're providing something that people want, and not just something that people want, but something that people want a lot.
Yeah. Right.
There's if you know chemistry, there's an activation energy for any given reaction that you have to cross in order for the reaction to happen. It could be that you mix A and B together, and A and B are flammable, but you actually have to bring a match to set them off. You have to get them over the activation energy for the reaction to happen. So People are very much the same way. I can make the next email app that is, by all means, a lot better. Maybe 50% better than any other email app. But everyone's just going to keep using Apple Mail or their iPhone or whatever app they use just because it's not so good they have to switch.
Right.
It has to be literally so much better that they can't not do it. That's kind of why Uber worked, because I can't think of a single person who took taxi rides and they're like, oh my God, I love taxis.
Yeah.
Everyone hates taxis.
Yep.
They scam you. They're dirty. They're expensive. They're hard to get. If you're not at the airport. Uber comes around. It's cheap. It's fast. They're regular people. How could you not? If someone pitched me the idea of Uber, I don't even need to see it. I'll tell you, wow, I would love that. Not just I would like it, I would love it.
Yep. Nicer cars, paying through an app, everything's more convenient. Absolutely.
That's why it works. And that's an easier concept to explain because people get it. But the thing is that you have to make sure whatever it is you're working on, it doesn't elicit oh, that would be nice kind of reaction. Because given the options, people always prefer more options over less. So if you're building Uber for X, they'll say, oh, that's nice. And that's just because they would like to choose between the options. It has to be so much better that they're literally bothering you about, wow, when can I get this? How can I get it? Like, is it available? Can I do something with it? And that's really the biggest indication that you're working on something that even has any potential, because that's step 1 is, do people really, really want it? Step 2 is making sure that you keep in mind, despite the fact that you're startup your life and all of that, that as it turns out, plenty of people do live their lives just fine without building and running startups. They live very happy and fulfilling lives, and it turns out that you can too. Yeah, it's very common in Silicon Valley lore to take literally your entire self-worth, your identity, and tie it up in this company. And while you can do that, and if the company does well, it's entirely possible that you'll be doing high and mighty as well. Companies are just a thing you do like anything else. If you like making paintings and it turns out that you draw a painting and it doesn't quite turn out the way you want it to, you're not like, wow, my life is worthless. I have no friends. This was an awful idea. I've spent 18 months on this painting and everyone thinks it's ugly. Where is my place in the universe? Because if you do that with your startup and yourself, you'll quickly get there when something doesn't work. You'll evaluate. You're like, wow, this startup was supposed to make me Zuckerberg. Everyone said it was so great, but they're not buying it. That must mean everyone hates me. I've spent so much time and I've tried so hard and it's still not working. So I must just not be any good. Like if I try the hardest I possibly can and it's not good enough, then, I guess that must be me.
Right.
And that may, that's entirely false. You could be the smartest person on the planet, but if you convince yourself you're going to invent time travel, it just may not happen. It's a concept that was not meant to be, and it has nothing to do with the fact that you're a worthless human being or that you can't make things that people want or that your life doesn't have significance. It's just it was the wrong idea. And all that's to say, and it's easier said than done, but do try to have a life outside of your company. It's literally just something that you do. It's something that maybe makes more sense for you based on where you are in life and your goals, but it's not everything about you. It's not your reason for existence, which was definitely the way that I felt for months. It was like, wow, this is my calling in life, right?
Yeah. And
it turns out when your calling doesn't answer the door, makes you feel really bad about yourself. So all that's to say, look at the bigger picture. There's a really great PDF I found online. I think it's called 8260, maybe. It's the number of hours you have available in a 8260. Oh, I think it's 82,600 maybe. It's a PDF. It's based on the number of hours you have available over the course of a year. Okay. So the PDF, it's a really long and arduous process. It goes through maybe 7 categories. Each category has maybe 10 questions. And you go through this PDF, and it's an honest-to-God evaluation of everything about your life. It's, okay, your health. Are you happy with the way you look? Are you happy with, kind of your health status? Is it something you'd like to improve, change? What's your priority on that? Would you rather improve your career or your social life rather than your health or your fitness? Maybe you're a fitness addict and you need to figure out a way to focus on other things in life.
Right.
And the whole point of this worksheet, it took me maybe a combined 10 or 20 hours to get through this thing. It was 5 or 10 coffee shop trips, each of which leaves you feeling just completely drained because it's the most, it's an interrogation for yourself. It's really evaluating, instead of just asking the big question, oh, what should I do with my life? What is my purpose? What have the stars divined for me to do? Instead, it asks the 1,000 smaller questions about what are the pieces of your life you do and don't like? What are things that you've done in the past that you wish you could do more? What are things you're doing now that you wish you could do less? And by the time you get through this worksheet, not only do you have at least an actionable plan of things to, instead of just enjoy life more, it's a clear priority list of, oh, the thing that makes me the most unhappy right now is the fact that I don't get out very much. So I need to join some clubs and make some new friends. Great. That's actionable. Instead of, I don't have any friends. I'm sad. What do? But also I don't have any money. And also I wish I worked out more. But mostly it's the friends.
Yeah.
The point is, when you get done with this worksheet, your answer to those questions is, something along the lines of, how do you justify your existence in this world? If you had to start with the base assumption that you shouldn't be here, and you have to explain to a jury why you deserve to exist, why you're here, what your job is, why you deserve to be here instead of someone else, the answer is not going to be to do X startup. It's not going to be to start this company. It's going to be something like to help people that, got unlucky in the game of birth roulette. They grew up in underdeveloped countries and they're bright and intelligent, but they just never had the opportunities that they should have been given. So I'm trying to rectify that. Great. Your startup may be the way to do that. But if it's not, that's fine too. The startup wasn't your life purpose. It was just a means to an end. Like we had talked about, my perspective is I'm really trying to garner kind of the greatest variety of life experiences I possibly can in a single lifetime. And while a startup is a great way to do that, I'll tell you, you get lots of ups, lots of downs. Everything that takes 10 years at a regular company, you go through in about 6 months instead. I've also realized that isn't necessarily the only way I can do things. Traveling is a great way to do that as well. If you want to work for a company, if I want to go out and be a deep sea fisherman, that's not sexy by Silicon Valley standards. You're not making 6-figure salaries doing that. It's cold. It's wet. You're a blue collar laborer. Geez, that doesn't sound like an entrepreneur to me. But that's not what I decided that my purpose is. It's not to be a Zuckerberg or a Musk or any of that necessarily. It's maximizing for these experiences. So all that's to say, if you haven't seen it before, and I wish I could tell you exactly where I found it, but Google should tell you. I think it's 82,600 is the name of this document. He recommends that you go through this thing once a year. And so I've done this for 2 years now. I have it in my note-taking app. It's literally a 30-page document each time of in-depth answers to each of these questions, ratings, things like that. That's the closest you'll get to finding kind of what your life purpose is, at least right now. Instead of just guessing or trying things out. I want to make the world a better place.
Right.
As great as that is, that does not help you figure out how to do that. It's just not actionable.
I know, people ask what's the meaning of life, and my favorite answer has always been that the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And this sounds like a great tool to do that, to figure out not just here is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I feel like I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to start XYZ startup, but for discovering the deeper why that sort of drives you out of bed each morning. That's kind of what this sounds like. It helps you discover.
Precisely. And I mean, arguably at the end of the day, that's literally the most important thing you can decide. And this goes back to what I was talking about with a startup, is figuring out just the premise, the why, the why. The how, anyone can figure out a how. It's the why, your why. So if it takes you 2 months and that's all you can do is just filling out this worksheet and you cry a little bit and then you fill it out a little bit more, wouldn't you rather spend that time doing that instead of spending months or years doing the wrong thing, something that takes you further away or is tangential to what you're really aiming for? I think the successful dropout movement, the reason that we left school was not to be revolutionaries per se, or to be countercultural, because we can't do dream. Everyone's in school, so we have to drop out. That's not why we left. We left because all, for whatever reason, decided that we had different priorities. Most people don't have any priorities. They follow kind of the default standard of what you're supposed to do, which is a nice substitution. But we all decided that we had something very specific that we thought our lives were worth doing, or things that we wanted to do, and school wasn't the way to do it. I have a friend who wants to be a theoretical physicist, and as much as he dislikes kind of the way the college education system has gone, and the way he's taking classes on things he doesn't care about and all that, as a theoretical physicist, that is the best way for him to accomplish what he wants, which is to become like the next Einstein. It's to be in academia, given kind of the freedom to explore things he wants, things that don't necessarily make any money, but may change, space travel or whatever else in the future. All that's to say, the biggest kind of takeaway that I've gotten just since I left school is that when you drop out of the prescribed life path, you no longer get to resort to defaults on what you're supposed to do. You have to really, really think things through because you can do anything. I could tomorrow fly a plane down to Bolivia and go hang out in the Amazon rainforest, find an uncontacted tribe, and attempt to live with them. Like, I mean, it's insane. People are like, "Oh yeah, you could." I don't buy that. You wouldn't, but you could.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if your end goal is to try to live like the natives did 1,000 years ago, and you think that you were born into a century too late, maybe that's your best way to accomplish that. I'm meandering now, but I hope that kind of elucidates a little bit more on kind of like what we had been talking about. Was just, it's never an easy question, but figuring out just a vector, a point at which you're working towards. How do you decide between A and B? What is that equation?
Well, I got my next question for you is, when are you going to write a book or start a podcast or something like that? I mean, dude, this stuff is so good. I mean, you're a real philosopher at heart. I can tell that. I kind of feel like I'm sitting at the feet of a young like Socrates or something here.
So don't tell anyone. I think that was my Tinder tagline, was part-time philosopher.
Yep.
I thought that was kind of crazy. I thought that was kind of cool. I don't know. Maybe chicks find that to be a little crazy or something. But I had actually looked into, the reason I have this really nice microphone actually is I had looked into starting a podcast. Ironically, very much similar to this. It was going to be called 20 Under 20, which I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It's a term coined by the Teal Fellowship, I think, for their first class, because it was 20 kids under 20 years old. Premise being, kind of these game changer kids working on projects or research or whatever that was completely different than the status quo. That's why, I don't know. I don't think we've talked very much about the Teal Fellowship on here, but Teal Fellowship was, still kind of is actually, one of the only large, well-supported organizations that really advocates for, leaving school and doing kind of high technology research type of things, funded by Peter Thiel. I mean, Alex, my co-founder, was a 2014 Teal Fellow. So
we've had a couple of them on the show, actually, probably 4 or 5 now.
And there's a reason that you see them over and over again. All that's to say, there are resources kind of out there for learning more about. It's funny, whenever I was trying to leave school, the one thing that I was dying for was just some resource to hear from people who had done it. Because all you'll find online are the Inc. articles and the Forbes 500 listicles and the BuzzFeed articles, and it's not the same reading those things, which may or may not have been written by someone who even left school. They could just be, truisms, which I hate. But there are actually a lot of us out there. Teal Fellows, the Next Gen Summit community, which is kind of an offshoot of something similar. Kairos Society, I think, is something that is also similar. I mean, the Successful Dropout community, even this thing that you've built, it's not only kids who have left school or who have, done something crazy with their education, but there's a lot of us out there. Even just the Hackathon Hackers group, which I don't know if you've talked about that. It's a Facebook group kind of for usually young technology kids in high school, kids in college, things like that. It's called HH Dropouts. It's a Facebook group that's populated pretty much only by kids, between the ages of 18 and 22 who left school to work on their own things, to work for a company.
We had a lot of them come over to the Successful Dropout Facebook group, actually, because I think they're not too active anymore. Right.
So that's the thing is, I wish I had known, just trying to find people to talk to learn their experiences, that unfortunately, most of us are not very loud online. We're usually too busy figuring out what the hell it is we're going to be doing and how we're going to be making money and questioning whether or not we've even made the right decision to be writing Facebook posts and Medium articles and things like that. So if you are interested in trying to find just people to talk to kind of get the more in-depth personal experience of like, okay, what happened to you? How did it feel? Do you think it was a good idea? Hearing my situation, is that very similar or different? You can't wait for people like us to come to you, because we probably won't. We're all we're all a little too focused on our own survival. But there are a lot of us out there. Yeah, you just need to reach out. Go to these Facebook groups. The Successful Dropout community, this podcast. Find resources like that. And if you reach out to us, I swear every single one of us will have a conversation with you. We love nothing more than to be that resource for people that we never had, because it's a very common story. Very few of us had the opportunity to get a really informed decision before we made our jump. And we want to help other people, kids, adults, make that jump too, if that's what is right for them. I'm kind of that among my high school friends, some of whom just kind of know of me. I'm that resource people go to now when they don't like their first semester of college or their first year, and they're like, "Oh, this kind of sucks. Should I leave school?" We have a conversation. Is that the right thing for you? Do you want to be a race car driver? Okay. Do you have the resources, money, time, knowledge to do that without going to school? Is a mechanical engineering degree really the better way to go about it? Maybe you should change schools instead of leaving school. We're here, essentially, is all I'm saying. I don't think any podcast or any article will ever provide kind of the personal details that you need to know whether or not something like this is right for you. But all of us, the people, we do. So you just need to, you need to reach out.
Yeah. And that's the dang truth. I mean, basically my main motivation for continuing Successful Dropout is because I absolutely love and am extremely passionate about talking to you guys. And I probably spend anywhere from an hour to 2 hours a day now just responding to emails and messages. The other day I would talk to somebody for, an hour and a half on the phone, because I also give out my phone number. And so I know Braun is in that group as well. Just loves to talk to people. His last episode, as I've already explained, was very popular, and he was sending me some emails that he got back from you guys, and I'm always, I love to see that. Anyways, Braun, I've got another call that I've got to get off on right now, but this was amazing, and I dare say we might have to have you on for a round 3 soon. You're just kind of a never-ending source of young wisdom here.
So we had talked about this. I'll actually give one last piece of hot advice, which I didn't find anywhere on the internet, and good Lord Almighty, I wish I had known. So if you're a high school age student and you're hedging your bets for whatever reason, you're crazy like me, and you decided, I'm going to leave high school. Well, 1, good luck. But 2, you need to know about something. It's CHESPE, CHESPE, I think is the way it's spelled. It's the California High School Equivalency certificate program. So the way this thing works is, if you are over the age of either 15 or 16, I believe, you can, no matter where you live in the U.S., you can fly over to California and take this test. And it's depressingly easy, I'll tell you. But the test is maybe 2 or 3 hours. It's like $50 to sign up for. And when you pass, which you will pass, when you pass, you get a California high school equivalency certificate, which is not quite the same as a regular high school diploma. It's essentially the same as like a GED. Okay. The difference is you can't take your GED, at least from what I could tell, until you're over 18. The GED is meant to catch you up to everyone else. It's not meant to get you ahead. So the California equivalency certificate, if you do decide to go back to school and you want to apply to somewhere like Stanford does require a high school diploma. a school like MIT doesn't. But if you want to go to Stanford and you want to hedge your bets, that is the single best tip I can give you, because it costs you very little to do. It's very easy to pull off. And all it does is it gives you more options down the road if for whatever reason you decide that you want to change your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an incredible resource. I checked that out when you told me a while ago, so thanks for bringing that up again. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes, guys. But Successful Dropouts, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most, and you've been hanging out with Braun and Kylan today, learning what it takes to drop out and grind and succeed. For everything we talked about, as always, go to successfuldropout.com and type Braun into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And Braun, maybe I'd love to figure out a way to do like a Q&A somehow with you. We haven't done that on the show yet, but we're brainstorming on some different ways to continue building Successful Dropout, and I think you'd be a good candidate for that. And it seems like people would probably have questions to ask you, but so stay tuned for that.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. But as always, guys, stay hungry, stay foolish.